In the far reaches of the galaxy lies the Valari home system, once a thriving civilization known for its advanced technology and peaceful culture. The Valari were explorers and diplomats, weaving alliances across star systems, their sleek cities, a testament to harmony between nature and technology. But everything changed when the Krix warlords descended. The Krix were a brutal, expansionist faction, their empire built on conquest, subjugation, and terror. Ruthless and fanatical, they showed no mercy to those who resisted. The Valari, despite their advanced tech, were unprepared for the onslaught. The Krix forces overwhelmed planetary defenses with sheer numbers and savage tactics, turning vibrant worlds into ashes and scattering survivors. In a last desperate act, the Valari sent a galaxy-wide SOS broadcast, a plea for aid encoded with their plight and coordinates. It was a call sent not just through official channels but also as a raw, unfiltered beacon carried on every frequency, desperate enough to reach anyone who might listen. Most species that intercepted the distress signal hesitated. Some dismissed it as a trap, fearing Krix trickery. Others saw it as a distant conflict too dangerous or complicated to intervene in. The galaxy, wary and politically divided, largely chose to turn away, but among those who heard was a far different listener. A coalition of humans known as the Deathworlders. These were not ordinary humans. They hailed from some of the harshest, most unforgiving planets in known space, worlds with extreme climates, lethal predators, and hostile environments that forged them into fierce survivors and warriors. The Deathworlders had a reputation that preceded them, relentless, adaptive, and brutal in combat, with tactics honed to perfection from years of surviving and thriving where others would perish. Their leaders quickly analyzed the Valari distress call, decoding not just the coordinates but the urgency and desperation beneath the transmission. Unlike other species, Deathworlders understood suffering. Many had lost everything to their own homeworld's dangers, and they recognized the Krix menace as a threat not only to the Valari, but to the fragile balance of power in the galaxy. Without hesitation, the human Deathworlder fleet began mobilizing. Their ships were a stark contrast to the elegant Valari cruisers or the overwhelming Krix dreadnoughts. Designed for stealth, survival, and combat in the deadliest conditions, their vessels were heavily armored, equipped with adaptive shielding, and armed with weapons optimized for close-quarter warfare and rapid strikes. Their crews were hardened veterans trained to think on their feet and endure unimaginable hardships. While other species debated politics or feared involvement, the Deathworlders answered the call. They didn't seek glory or alliances. They answered out of instinct and honor. The SOS was a challenge, and Deathworlders thrived on challenges. As their fleet left human space, the Valari signal continued to pulse faintly across the void, a beacon of hope and desperation intertwined. Somewhere beyond the stars, the fate of the Valari hung in balance, and the arrival of the human fleet promised a new, unpredictable chapter. The stage was set for a clash that would shake the galaxy, an ancient race on the brink of extinction, a merciless invader intent on domination, and the wild, unyielding humans from the Deathworlds, ready to tip the scales. The human Deathworlder fleet emerged from the dark void near the Valari system, entering a region scarred by violence and devastation. What had once been a flourishing network of planets was now a war-torn inferno. The sight that greeted the human commanders was harrowing. Entire cities lay in ruins, their glass towers shattered and their streets smoldering beneath thick plumes of smoke. Orbital defense arrays, once the pride of the Valari, floated disabled and shattered, twisted by relentless bombardments. The aftermath of the Krix invasion was a brutal testament to their savagery. The fleet's sensors picked up scattered Valari survivor groups hidden among asteroid belts and ruined outposts. Many were injured, traumatized, and broken by the occupation. The Valari themselves were a race of lithe, ethereal beings with pale, translucent skin that shimmered faintly under the light of their dying sun. They had always been known for their diplomatic nature and technological prowess, not for warfare or brutality. Now, faced with the Krix warlords' merciless tactics, they were desperate, vulnerable, yet hopeful that help had finally arrived. As the human commanders opened communications, the Valari voices came through, shaky but relieved. They shared harrowing accounts, cities razed with no mercy, resistance fighters hunted down and executed, families torn apart. The Crix had not merely conquered, they had sought to break the Valari spirit entirely. But the Deathworlders were no strangers to desperation. Unlike other species, they thrived in chaos and hardship. Their battle-hardened crews quickly adapted to the terrain, and their ships, built for resilience and surprise strikes, began probing Crix-controlled zones with stealth and precision. Early Owain encounters were brutal. Crix patrols, large and heavily armed, overwhelmed smaller forces with sheer numbers. Yet, the Deathworlders used their advantage. Advanced camouflage tech, bioengineered weapons, and guerrilla tactics refined on Deathworld planets. Rather than engaging in large fleet battles, humans struck quickly, disabling Crix supply lines, ambushing convoys, and sabotaging communication arrays. Their approach was surgical and relentless. The Valari, witnessing the humans' ferocity and ingenuity, found a flicker of renewed hope. Their centuries-old faith in diplomacy had left them vulnerable, but the humans embodied a different kind of strength, a raw, unyielding will to survive and fight. One of the human fleet's leading, Commander's Captain Merrick Draven, observed the Crix behavior closely. The Crix were not only physically brutal, but also cunning, employing psychological warfare and fear tactics to control occupied worlds. They used captured Valari technology to enforce mind control over some populations, creating puppet forces that hunted their own people. This dark discovery steeled the humans' resolve. They knew that conventional warfare wouldn't be enough. Human squads began collaborating directly with Valari resistance fighters, combining Valari stealth tech and human tactical acumen. They shared knowledge of Crix movements and weaknesses. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Valari worlds once thought lost were liberated, and pockets of Crix forces found themselves outmaneuvered by an enemy they had never fully understood. The arrival of the human Deathworlders was a turning point. Where other species had seen only a lost cause, humans saw a fight worth winning. The galaxy's undercurrent shifted. This wasn't just a rescue mission, it was the beginning of a brutal war to reclaim a stolen home. Yet, the Crix warlords were no fools. They recognized the danger the humans posed, striking from the shadows, unpredictable and relentless. For the first time, the Crix began to prepare for a fight that would test their empire's might. The stage was set for an escalating conflict, one that would not only decide the fate of the Valari, but also reveal just how deadly and unstoppable Deathworlders could be. With the arrival of the human Deathworlder fleet, the tide of the brutal Crix occupation began to shift. The Valari, once resigned to their fate, now found new hope in the fierce and unpredictable warriors who had come to their aid. But humans were far from typical allies. They brought with them a ferocity born of harsh worlds, survival instincts sharpened by generations of battling deadly environments, and a tactical ingenuity that shocked the Crix at every turn. The Deathworlders wasted no time in applying their unique combat expertise. Unlike most species that relied on overwhelming firepower or advanced technology alone, humans used their intimate knowledge of hostile environments to their advantage. They began deploying environmental traps across key battlefields. Bioengineered predators released into Crix supply routes, lethal flora cultivated in strategic choke points, and devastating terrain modifications that turned once safe zones into death traps. These Deathworld tactics disrupted Crix logistics and morale. Supply convoys vanished without a trace, patrols were ambushed in deadly swarms, and Crix troops were forced to move cautiously through territory that had become a living nightmare. The Valari, unfamiliar with such brutal methods, watched in awe as humans turned every corner and crevice of the war-ravaged planets into a lethal battlefield. Human commanders coordinated with Valari resistance fighters to combine alien stealth technology with human guerrilla warfare. This fusion created highly effective strike teams that executed lightning raids on Crix outposts, then disappeared into the shadows before counterattacks could be organized. The Crix, confident in their dominance, found themselves repeatedly outflanked and outsmarted. One particular tactic stood out. The humans' use of adaptive camouflage and biosuit enhancements allowed Deathworlders to infiltrate Crick's fortresses, undetected, planting explosives or hacking critical systems from within. Their resilience in hostile environments made them immune to many of the toxins and bioweapons the Cricks deployed, giving them a distinct advantage in prolonged combat. As battles raged, the Volari shared valuable intelligence about Crick's mind. Control technology, a cruel system used to turn Volari civilians and soldiers into unwilling puppets. Humans quickly prioritized destroying these devices and freeing those enslaved by the sinister tech. The psychological warfare of the Cricks had aimed to crush resistance by making victims fight their own people, but the humans' determination and compassion broke those chains. The Cricks leaders soon realized that the humans were no ordinary invaders. Their brutality was tempered by a ruthless pragmatism, their fighting style unlike anything Cricks commanders had encountered. Human Deathworlders were relentless, refusing to retreat even under overwhelming odds, adapting quickly to Crick's tactics, and turning every defeat into a lesson for the next engagement. As news of human successes spread among the Volari, their spirits lifted. Survivors who had once hidden in fear began emerging, rallying to join the fight alongside the humans. The resistance grew not just in numbers but in confidence. Despite setbacks, the Cricks escalated their efforts, unleashing heavier weapons and brutal reprisals against civilians in a desperate attempt to crush the uprising. But the human Deathworlders met every challenge head-on. Their hatred for oppressors fueled by the memory of their own brutal homeworlds and the countless battles they had survived. By the end of this phase, the Volari Cricks conflict had transformed into a full-scale war where Deathworlders led the charge. The Cricks' grip on the Volari home system was weakening, and the galaxy began to take notice of these savage humans who could turn the tide of war where others had failed. The stage was set for an even greater escalation, one where the full fury of the Deathworlders would be unleashed to reclaim what was lost and shatter the Cricks Empire's hold on the Volari system forever. The war for the Volari system had escalated into a brutal and relentless conflict. The human Deathworlder fleet, having already shattered Cricks patrols and liberated scattered worlds, now pushed deeper into enemy-held territory, determined to strike at the very core of the Cricks war machine. The Volari, once hesitant and cautious, now fought side by side with humans, their skills and technology combining in powerful ways. Volari resistance fighters, trained in stealth and sabotage, used their advanced cloaking devices and sensor jammers to infiltrate Crick strongholds, while human Deathworlders brought unmatched combat resilience and tactical ingenuity. Together, they formed an unstoppable alliance, one that sowed confusion and fear among the Cricks forces. As the human fleet advanced, they encountered the full might of the Cricks Empire's defenses. Massive warships, fortified planetary installations, and ruthless shock troops awaited them. The Cricks, desperate to maintain control over the system, deployed their deadliest weapons, planet-destroying bombardments, bioengineered super soldiers, and merciless drone swarms. The battlefield was a crucible of fire and blood. Despite the overwhelming odds, the Deathworlders refused to falter. Their ships, designed for endurance and rapid adaptability, absorbed the initial bombardments and retaliated with precision strikes against Crick's command centers and supply lines. Ground forces, equipped with bio-enhanced armor and weaponry, battled fiercely on shattered cities and toxic wastelands, turning every inch of terrain into a contest of survival and skill. One key to the Deathworlders' success was their ability to quickly learn and adapt to Crick's tactics. Every encounter, whether victory or setback, provided invaluable data that human commanders used to refine their strategies. They exploited Crick's arrogance and rigid command structures, setting traps and ambushes that decimated enemy units and disrupted communications. The Volari resistance proved invaluable in guiding human forces through the labyrinthine Cricks networks. Their knowledge of hidden tunnels, abandoned outposts, and secret weapons caches gave the Deathworlders tactical advantages that the Cricks could not anticipate. Amid this chaos, a shadow war unfolded. Human intelligence operatives infiltrated Cricks leadership, gathering secrets and sabotaging critical infrastructure from within. Using a combination of Valari hacking skills and human stealth tactics, they crippled Crick's supply chains and weapon factories, weakening the enemy's capacity to wage war. The intensity of the fighting pushed both sides to their limits. Deathworlders endured toxic atmospheres, radiation storms, and the psychological strain of constant combat. Yet their resilience never wavered. Their hatred for the Crick's invaders, fueled by stories of their own brutal pasts, ignited a fierce determination that inspired the Valari fighters. In one pivotal battle near the Crick's capital world, human forces orchestrated a daring assault that shattered the enemy's central command hub. The Crick's warlords, forced to abandon their fortified positions, fled in disarray as the Valari resistance swarmed to reclaim their homeworld. Yet the war was far from over. The Crick's, though battered, still possessed vast reserves and dark secrets. The Deathworlders knew that to truly end the occupation, they would have to strike at the heart of the Crick's empire itself, beyond the Valari system, into the very core of Crick's power. The alliance between humans and Valari had transformed from a desperate rescue mission into a campaign of liberation and vengeance. The Deathworlders had not only survived the firestorm, they had become its fiercest flame. As the fleet prepared for the next phase of the war, a grim realization settled among human commanders. The Crick's would not surrender easily. The coming battles would test their endurance, resolve, and humanity itself. With the Valari system largely liberated and the Crick's forces pushed into retreat, the human Deathworlder fleet faced a bold new challenge, striking directly at the heart of the Crick's empire itself. This was no longer just a rescue mission or a defensive war. It was an offensive campaign to dismantle the brutal Crick's dominion from within. The Crick's empire was vast, sprawling across countless star systems, with a rigid, authoritarian hierarchy ruled by warlords obsessed with conquest and domination. Their capital world, Crathor Prime, was a fortress planet wrapped in layers of defenses, bristling with weapons and guarded by legions of fanatical soldiers. As the Deathworlders approached the outer edges of Crick space, they encountered a stark contrast to the Valari worlds they had fought to reclaim. Crathor Prime was a nightmarish bastion, forged through centuries of war and hardened by a culture of violence. The planet's surface was a jagged wasteland of steel fortresses, toxic wastelands, and sprawling factories dedicated to producing war machines and biological weapons. The humans knew that a direct assault on Crathor Prime would be suicidal. Instead, they devised a plan that leveraged their strengths: stealth, adaptability, and psychological warfare. The fleet split into multiple task forces, each tasked with disrupting Crick's supply lines, sabotaging production facilities, and igniting rebellion among oppressed populations on subjugated worlds. On the ground, elite Deathworlder strike teams partnered with insurgents from several conquered species who had suffered under Crick's rule. These alliances, forged in shared hatred for their oppressors, were fragile but effective. The combined forces launched lightning raids, crippling Crick's infrastructure and spreading chaos through enemy ranks. One notable operation involved infiltrating a Crick's bioweapon facility, rumored to be developing a new breed of monstrous super soldiers. Using their signature adaptive camouflage and bio-enhanced abilities, human operatives penetrated deep into the facility, planting explosives and extracting vital intelligence before slipping away unseen. Meanwhile, the fleet engaged in fierce skirmishes against Crick's patrols and warships, attempting to suppress the uprisings. The Deathworlders' unconventional tactics, honed on their own Deathworld planets, confounded Crick's commanders who expected traditional, predictable warfare. Humans fought with savage precision, exploiting every weakness and turning the Crick's own fear and paranoia against them. As the campaign progressed, cracks began to appear in the Crick's command structure. Some warlords, wary of the mounting losses and internal dissent, started questioning their leaders' ruthless strategies. Rumors of infighting and betrayal circulated, fueling hope among the resistance. But the Crick's were far from defeated. In a desperate move, their high command unleashed a terrifying weapon, a doomsday device capable of annihilating entire planets. The Deathworlders' intelligence networks uncovered the plan just in time, prompting a race against the clock to locate and disable the device before it could be activated. This mission would test the Deathworlders' courage and ingenuity more than any battle before. It required a daring infiltration into Crethar Prime itself, facing overwhelming odds and confronting the darkest horrors the Crix could unleash. The successful disabling of the Doomsday device sent shockwaves through the Crix Empire and emboldened oppressed populations across the galaxy. The Deathworlders had proven they could strike at the very core of Crix power and live to fight another day. As Part 5 closes, the war had evolved beyond the Valari system. It was now a galaxy-wide struggle for freedom, led by fierce human Deathworlders whose unyielding spirit had become a beacon of hope and a nightmare for the Crix. The war against the Crix Empire had reached its climax. After years of brutal, fighting guerrilla campaigns and daring infiltrations, the human Deathworlder fleet and their allies stood ready to deliver the decisive blow. The stakes were no longer just about liberating the Valari or striking fear into the Crix. This was a battle for the fate of the entire galaxy. The Deathworlders had transformed from mysterious saviors into legendary warriors known throughout the stars for their resilience, cunning, and terrifying ferocity. Their fleet had grown stronger, bolstered by allied species inspired by humanity's unbreakable spirit and unyielding will to fight oppression. Crethar Prime, the heart of the Crix Empire, was now the focal point of the final campaign. The planet's defenses were near impenetrable, guarded by legions of fanatical soldiers, automated weapon systems, and deadly bioengineered guardians. The Crix warlords, desperate and enraged, marshaled every resource available for what they proclaimed would be their last stand. The Deathworlders, however, had learned from every previous encounter. Their strategy was multi-layered, a massive diversionary assault from orbit to draw out Crix forces, simultaneous ground assaults using elite strike teams, and cyber warfare units aimed at crippling the planet's command infrastructure. As the Abiyan fleet engaged Crethar's orbital defenses, the ground forces slipped through secret tunnels and devastated landscapes to strike at critical targets: weapons factories, command bunkers, and the central data core. The human Deathworlders, enhanced by biosuits and adaptive camouflage, moved with lethal precision through hostile terrain, neutralizing enemy patrols and rescuing captive allies. The battle was grueling and merciless. Crix soldiers fought with fanaticism, refusing to surrender even as their empire crumbled. But the Deathworlders' superior tactics and unyielding endurance gradually broke the enemy lines. Each victory was hard-won, but it sowed chaos and panic within Crethar's leadership. At the climax of the battle, the human commanders confronted the Crix High Warlord, a terrifying figure shrouded in bio-armor and wielding advanced weapons. The duel was brutal, a clash of raw strength, cunning, and unrelenting willpower. The Deathworlders fought not just for survival, but to end centuries of tyranny and oppression. With the High Warlord defeated and the Crix command structure shattered, the remaining enemy forces disintegrated into disorganized groups. The Deathworlders and their allies took control of Crethar Prime, freeing countless prisoners and securing vital technology to prevent any future threats. But victory came with a sobering cost. The Deathworlders had lost many brave warriors, and the galaxy bore scars from the conflict. Yet humanity's brutal resilience had rewritten the balance of power. The once feared Crix Empire was no more. In the aftermath, the Valari and other liberated species began rebuilding, with human advisors helping to establish lasting peace and security. The Deathworlders, though battle-worn, prepared to continue their vigilance, knowing that darkness might rise again. The story closes on a powerful note. The humans, forged on Deathworlds and hardened by relentless adversity, had answered the SOS not merely with weapons, but with unbreakable spirit and an uncompromising will to fight for justice. Their legend would inspire generations to come across the stars,